Welcome. The topic for today's video is our resistance to forgiveness and false forgiveness. When we look around the world, we don't see many examples of forgiveness, but quite a lot of what the Course calls forgiveness to destroy or false forgiveness, which we'll look at later. The material in this video is drawn mainly from my book, Healing the Cause. It is often thought by people new to studying the Course in Miracles that their lives will become more peaceful as they begin to practice its teachings. However, this does not always follow. In fact, things may seem to become worse, not better. Before practicing the principles of the Course, they will probably have heeded the ego's counsel and denied the guilt they feel and projected it onto others. They feel confident the problems are in the world and not in their minds. This is illustrated in the next diagram. We all carry guilt. The large percentage of it is unconscious, and ultimately this is the guilt of separation from union, from spirit, from God. It's when we had that tiny mad idea that the Course talks about, that could individuality, separation, specialness be more interesting, more exciting, more rewarding than oneness. Once we made that decision, we were horrified at what had happened, felt tremendously guilty, and to deal with it, we denied it. And that's the lower part of the iceberg you see. But it sits there in all of us, and is so easily triggered even by somebody not looking at you the way you like, or especially if they make a negative comment about you. It's that guilt that's triggered. Otherwise, all you'd have is compassion for their negativity. The ego has a response of denial and projection, which we will look at in a separate video. But suffice to say here, we try and get rid of this awful feel of guilt by throwing it outwards, projecting it outwards. We want to get out of our minds where the problem is. We can project it onto other people, where we get angry at them. You're out of your mind when you do that, so you're away from where the real issue is, and the ego is safe in its disguise. Or you can actually project it onto yourself and become sick, so your attention is now focused on your body. Again, you've achieved the ego's purpose of leaving the mind behind where healing can occur, and focusing outside yourself on your body or somebody else's body where healing can't occur. The Course's teaching is to reverse this, to see the problem is not in the world, but in our minds. And this is when we can start to make progress. Now we attempt to bring the unconscious mind to consciousness, which starts the process of undoing denial, bringing our guilt to the light of the Holy Spirit to be forgiven. To become aware of the ego's darkness in the mind is not an easy process. The principle of forgiveness, as described in the Course, is relatively simple to understand and brings us great rewards if we apply them. Let's have a look at this now. What we're asked to do here is that when our guilt is being triggered, that instead of projecting it outwards, own up to the fact this is our stuff. Our anger is a red flag that's saying this. And to look without judgment, which is what forgiveness is, at our guilt. It's also true that most of us find it very difficult to own our pain and ask for help. To help us understand why this is so, the Course goes to great lengths to show how subtle and devious the ego really is. We are largely unconscious of the way it operates, owing to the wall of denial we have constructed. The Course encourages us to look behind that wall and learn to laugh gently at what we find there. To laugh at the ego is not to take it seriously, and it hates this. We only keep it alive by taking it very seriously. As we practice forgiveness, at the same time we shall be lessening the importance we've given to the ego. Having identified so strongly with the ego's thought system, it seems that we are sacrificing something very dear to us. As we bring our darkness, that is the illusions, to the light, which is the truth, the Course states that we will experience, quote, periods of unsettling. These are times of discomfort and anxiety that we must inevitably feel in the process of shifting from the ego's thought system, which the Course calls wrong-mindedness, to the Holy Spirit's thought system, which it calls right-mindedness. The Course says, first, they, God's teachers, that's us, must go through what we might call a period of undoing. This need not be painful, but it is usually so experienced. It seems as if things are being taken away, and it's rarely understood initially that their lack of value is merely being recognized. This quotation is taken from a section which describes the 6 stages in the development of trust. Jesus cautions us that 4 of these stages are normally experienced as difficult, and thus we should not underestimate the challenges involved in spiritual growth, especially at the beginning when we start to practice this. The ego is going to win most of the battles. You'll find yourself getting angry again and shouting out. Perhaps a bit later you'll reflect and say, there I go again. I thought the problem was out there. My guilt's been triggered and I've attacked. Oh well. And then you forgive yourself for doing that. And then, of course, it'll happen again. But this time you might notice it quicker. And that's what happens with forgiveness. The awareness grows, and the gap between the anger and seeing it and perhaps apologizing gets narrowed. It would be helpful to look closer at our investment in the ego and what it seems to offer us. As we start to question the gifts it holds out to us, our practice of forgiveness will become easier. Here's a few of the things that our ego chases after in the mistaken quest that'll bring a permanent happiness. Sure, it can bring a temporary one, but nothing lasts in the ego's world. We can seek for status, prestige. We may look for happiness in pills. We look to be liked, and we alter our behavior so we are liked. Or perhaps we think money will solve it. They're all our replacements for the love of God, which is just sitting outside this crazy circle, waiting to be invited in. The Course states you would oppose this course because it teaches you and your brothers are alike. Text, chapter 24, section 1, paragraph 8. Forgiveness teaches us that our egos are all the same, as is our Christ nature. This, of course, is the last thing that the ego wants to hear. We're all the same. It's hard to see that we only hate someone because we have their attributes as well. Currently, a lot of people hate the American president, Mr. Trump. What this is saying is that this only happens because we have some of the characteristics of Trump inside us, inside our own mind. We hate to see these, we deny them, and we project them onto him. If we didn't have Trump-like negative characteristics, he's got positive ones as well, of course, but if we stick with the negative characteristics, if we didn't have them inside us, then we just have compassion for his negative behavior. If we have anger, the red flags come up again. There's a Trump negativity in us, and that's where our focus of forgiveness needs to be. And when we've achieved this, the day will come when we'll look at some politician behaving badly, and there'll just be a compassion there, and nothing else. But of course, to recognize this, the ego has great opposition to. This is why there's a great resistance to forgiveness. Actually, Pogo summed it all up in a very short sentence. We have met the enemy, and he is us. Wise statement from a small being. For the ego to retain its desire for specialness, it must perceive differences between itself and others. If someone goes to a party, the last thing they want to find is someone also wearing the same outfit as them. We might experience a day when we feel open to the love of the Holy Spirit and feel a deep sense of peace and well-being. We may even think this state could last forever. However, we might wake the following day feeling depressed and alone and wonder why have things changed so much. To allow this shift to occur, we must be persuaded by our ego that continuing to listen to the Holy Spirit is dangerous. Actually, this reminds me of a workshop at Fintal many years ago that I was running, and a woman had a powerful breakthrough which she shared with the group. A sense of peace and oneness had come over her. They were very happy. The following day she came in depressed. What had happened, the ego had become very disturbed and had counseled her through the night. The ego and the Holy Spirit are working 24 hours a day, and said, don't go this way. Perhaps your partner will leave you for finding you so strange, or the boss might think you weird and not promote you. Go and get depressed. People can relate to that. The ego reminds us that it's safer to stay as we are, as change will involve sacrifice, and even worse, there is an avenging God awaiting us at the end of our journey, ready to punish us for our many sins. We are told that if we follow the path of forgiveness, we shall have to look at all the horror and darkness within our mind, and that we shall not survive this experience. The journey of forgiveness is not an easy one, but its success is guaranteed by God, for it's His will that we return to Him. In the supplement of the course, the Song of Prayer, Jesus lists 3 forms of false forgiveness. This is the world's forgiveness. Using the iceberg analogy again, on the surface, it seems all right, looks good without too much thought. But hiding under this false forgiveness is resentments and anger and hurt, spite and hate, and other things. In the Song of Prayer, it says, no gift of heaven has been more understood than has forgiveness. It has, in fact, become a scourge, a curse where it was meant to bless, a cruel mockery of grace, a parody upon the holy peace of God. The Song of Prayer pamphlet describes a number of false concepts about forgiveness, which are called forgiveness to destroy. And the first one is a very common one in this world. The holier than thou form of forgiveness. Firstly, there's what might be called the holier than thou form of forgiveness. In this, the offended person adopts a posture of spiritual superiority and seeming charity, and decides to, quote, forgive the inferior individual who has offended him or her. The person is effectively saying, out of the kindness of my heart, I forgive you for what you've done to me, but don't do it again. With this form of forgiveness, the, quote, forgiver does not see the problem as within him or her, and loses an opportunity to heal herself of what the other person is mirroring to her. Song of Prayer pamphlet says, forgiveness to destroy has many forms, being a weapon of the world of form. Not all of them are obvious, and some are carefully concealed beneath what seems like charity. Another form of false forgiveness can be described as that of the martyred saint. In this form, a person believes he is a sinner and deserves God's punishment, which he accepts with apparent humility and lack of defense. However, this is a statement of belief in the ego and not in God. Only the ego counsels us we have sinned. We may actively seek to be martyred so we can display our, quote, saintliness to others. In the Course, Jesus says, I do not ask for martyrs, but for teachers. However, behind an exterior of smile and acceptance lies the anger and bitterness we feel towards the other person. Thus, the ego uses false forgiveness to reinforce our belief in it. The last form of forgiveness to destroy is based on bargaining and compromise. As long as another person is meeting most of our ego needs, we're willing to forgive their transgressions against us from time to time. However, when our needs are no longer met, there's no reason left to forgive them. And our denied hate now rises to the surface in the form of an attack. For example, I have discovered you're having an affair. This must stop now, and we can continue our relationship. This is the bargaining form of forgiveness. I'll forgive you if you change your behavior. However, also implied is, but if this happens again, I will leave you because it's unforgivable.